Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another exciting night of NBA basketball.
The Pistons are digging in. They got the depth. They got the big men. They got the better basketball team. No doubt about it.
Pistons need a three, and they have just under 3 seconds to do it. Here's Johnson Phillips. Here it is. He's got it. He's got it. Johnson Phillips hits the three. Overtime. Amazing. Out of bounds. Detroit basketball.
Pistons fans, welcome back to another edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast, brought to you by Believe and our friends over at the FanDuel Sportsbook. Aaron Johnson and Jasper Apollonia here for you this week, coming here after a Detroit Pistons season opening loss to the Chicago Bulls. We are going to talk about a lot of what transpired in that game. A very, very disappointing way for the Detroit Pistons to start the season. We'll talk about the federal investigation and the major news that shocked the NBA landscape on Thursday as the FBI came out and named arrested several people in the league regarding their federal investigation into gambling and an illegal poker probe. We'll also look ahead at the Pistons' schedule following the opening night loss and what is a very challenging next 5 games ahead for a team that just dropped one to what should have been a much inferior opponent. But before we do that, Jasper, how are we doing today?
Well, I'd be doing a lot better if the Pistons had won last night and one of my favorite players of all time didn't just get arrested for working with the mafia to use X-ray poker tables, which is a new thing to me. I didn't know that was real. I thought that was something that like a middle schooler would make up in order to get away with cheating his friends out of $10. But apparently that's a real thing, man. Yeah, doing well. Just excited to have basketball back. And Aaron, look, the Pistons weren't the only ones playing yesterday. I don't know if you watched Victor Wembanyama drop 40 and 15. That was one of the most insane things I've ever seen.
Can I just cut you off right there?
Go right ahead.
Because I did turn on the Spurs Mavericks game after the Pistons game. And I don't mean this as hyperbole. Is Victor Wembanyama going to end up being the greatest basketball player of all time? I watched him just like within a span of maybe 3 game minutes score in like back-to-back possessions. He had like 2 blocks, maybe a steal or a deflection in that same period of time. Just on both sides of the ball, dude, he was involved in every play and made the winning play in every trip down the court, one way or the other.
That reverse pump and one jam was like where he took him baseline and he just finished like this, like it was nothing. I don't even know what to say. Oh. I just rewatched it like 8 times in a row. I was just like, how? Yeah. I like, it's one of those things where it feels like it's almost like a Shaq thing, where it's just like, even if he's not the GOAT, he's like in his own special category where you go, okay, yeah, maybe these guys had better careers because there might, health, longevity, whatever it may be. Maybe other guys had better careers than him. But when he was playing, I don't know if anybody dominated the game in the way that Shaq did. Like, if you ever really watched Prime Shaq, you could not stop him. He dictated the landscape of the entire NBA in a way that up until Victor Wembanyama, I don't think I've never seen in my life.
I'm floored watching him, quite frankly. And the scary thing is he's 21 years old and he's doing these things, and it's just, I don't know how you stop him. And if he continues to trend in the direction that he's trending, he's only going to get stronger. He's only going to get smarter with the basketball. Like it feels like the only way you stop him is if he makes the mistake himself and turns the ball over one way or the other, because
It's either that or a tire iron to the knee, because
Right.
I don't know what else you can do.
Or it's going to be by his own mistake.
He made Anthony Davis look like a baby
for him.
Dude, he like big broed Anthony Davis every possession. I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah, and like the space that he's able to create, like he hit like a long like turnaround jumper, and it's just like the space that he created, like going from his back to the basket to falling away for the shot. It's like it's like the defender was never even near him. And that's how much space he created. It was insane.
Dude, I was watching the Pistons go down by 23 to the Bulls in the first half and going to myself, maybe we should just go all in anyway, because I don't know how we win a title if this guy's on the other side of the court in the middle of June.
Top 3 of the 2026 NBA draft seems like it's going to be pretty damn special with the guys that are there. So maybe the Pistons just need to take a gap year after what we saw last night. But here at the Palace of Pistons podcast, we bet with integrity, and I bet with integrity last night when I bet on the Pistons to beat the Chicago Bulls. And I don't know what I was thinking, because all the logic said, why would the line be falling to 2.5 if the Pistons are so much of a better team than the Bulls? The line kept dropping, and eventually I think it closed at 2.5 by tip-off, maybe even 2. And I made the bet anyways, and I realized that I played myself. It's the logic that if the books are if the line feels trappy, if it feels too good to be true, it's because it is. So I looked at that. Now I look at the Pistons line for the Houston Rockets game, and we're not going to do a deep dive on Houston yet. We'll talk about that game after we go through some of this gambling stuff, after we go through the Chicago game. But 5.5 is the line right now. Pistons are obviously dogs. They're on the road against a Houston team that kicked off the NBA season against the Oklahoma City Thunder in what I think was an instant classic, a double overtime game that was really just spectacular to watch, a great viewing experience. But 5.5, why? It kind of feels trappy. And like, maybe the Pistons will do the thing that they did last year where, and I wrote about this on palaceofpistons.com when I dropped my article on what I was looking for in the season opener for Detroit. But I talked about how last year they tended to play down to the inferior competition, to the teams that they should be beating, and then played up to the teams where it's like, okay, the Pistons are not going to win tonight, but hopefully they compete. And so maybe that's just going to be the vibe again for Detroit this year. Maybe they'll just really get up for these big games, and maybe they're still going to struggle with playing these inferior competition. But 5.5 the line right now as I look at FanDuel Sportsbook, our friends over there, and I'm wondering what side to be on. Jasper, can I defer to you here? You tell me what you think.
Well, I don't know, man. I saw the Houston Rockets throw out a lineup of Amen Thompson, Kevin Durant, Alperen Sengun, Jabari Smith Jr., and Steven Adams in that double OT game. Boy, that is hard, man. That's a hard lineup to look at. And I know they lost Fred VanVleet, and it's very apparent that they are going to miss his three-point shooting. But when you have a team like that where you can throw out 4 guys who are all 6'10" or bigger, and only one of them is a non-shooter, whew, that's scary, man. And then the last guy is Amen frickin' Thompson.
Right.
That's scary to look at. So yeah, I mean, look, we're in a league right now where there are some teams out in the West that have some physical specimens on them that are absolutely insane. But I think for me, look, should we get into last night's game, Aaron? Should we just start hitting on that right now?
Let's do that.
Yeah, let's do that. Look, I know a lot of people are disappointed with how last night's game went. But to be honest, if I'm looking at how that game went in a vacuum, 4-point loss, 115-111 to the Chicago Bulls, I think you hit it right on the head. It was a trap game. It was a classic trap game. The Pistons looked really good all preseason. Bulls were without Kobe White. But this is the kind of game that, like, I think if you look back at it, devoid of the context of, hey, this was opening night and we're really looking for the Pistons to get off on a hot stretch against a team that we think is not very good. that first quarter basically went as poorly as a first quarter can go for this team. Defensively, they looked totally lost. They missed so many shots at the rim. They went 6 for 15 in the paint in the first quarter. And I think they kind of just lost the game right there. That really was where it came down to. I know, Duncan Robinson and Karis LeVert both played quite poorly in their first games in a Pistons uniform. But that's also part of it. Like, Duncan Robinson did not shoot well, and he had some good looks in that game. I thought Cade Cunningham and Jalen Duren especially, they missed so many makeable shots. I just think that they dug themselves into too big of a hole with sloppy play to start the game, with poor finishing, with poor execution, and when they started to turn it up, they got themselves back into it, but it was too little too late. And if I'm looking at that, yes, it's very, very disappointing as a Pistons fan, but there was nothing about that game that did not look to me to be like what I expect out of this Pistons team this year. They just played poorly. Like, the fact of the matter is they played poorly for a quarter and a half of basketball. They dug themselves into a hole. They have enough talent to get themselves out of that hole, but with the lack of other ball handling on the roster, now that Jaden Ivey is hurt, and with the lack of front court depth, they just can't afford to have multiple guys go cold. Like, they can't afford to have bad Cade Cunningham nights. They can't afford to have nights where Jalen Duren has to guard Nikola Vucevic. They can't afford to have nights where nobody comes through with three-point shooting. They have some very apparent holes in this roster. It is not the end of the world, but there is also nothing here that is like not going to continue on throughout the season unless they do make some trades and depending on when they get Jaden Ivey back. I think when you look at the positives of last night's game, it's very clear. Asar Thompson, Isaiah Stewart, Ron Holland. This team is going to have to do exactly what they did down the stretch after they lost Jaden Ivey last year. They're going to have to lean into their defense, and that's going to take a little bit of time with new guys on the roster. So, Aaron, I think maybe people were coming on here, listening to this podcast, expecting us, of all people, to be extremely negative. Perhaps you are, but I'm really not. I really feel like that was a game they easily could have won if they just hadn't completely crapped the bed in the first quarter. I'm worried a little bit about the schedule coming up, for sure, but I don't think it's all doom and gloom after one game.
I don't think it's all doom and gloom, but I feel a little bit more down on this team than you do after that first game. I think coming off of a season where, you had so much success, you make the playoffs, you're clearly setting the tone of how you want your franchise to operate now in this new era. And you're essentially bringing back the same team that you ended last season with, with the addition of getting Isaiah Stewart back in the fold. You consider you're essentially replacing Malik Beasley with Duncan Robinson, and you're replacing Dennis Schroeder with Karis LeVert. And I just felt like they came out so flat yesterday, so uninspired on both sides of the court. And I think the defense is the most disappointing thing to me because they're going to so clearly have to be a top 10 defense right now to stay afloat because the offense is a major, major problem. It is only one game, but it's a concern that I've had, and it's a concern that I've shared throughout the offseason with the lack of ball handling and the lack of urgency to add ball handling to this group. Watching them try to play offense yesterday, it was an anemic experience. There was zero flow, and it's hurt when you're clearly missing ball handling, but you also have zero spacing, and you have only one guy capable of breaking a defense down. And I actually think, as much as I have, been pessimistic about him, having someone like Marcus Sasser out there yesterday just someone that could get the Bulls on their heels a little bit defensively, that could space the floor a little bit had they needed to put him out there alongside Cade Cunningham. Like, they just looked so, I don't want to say out of whack, because I don't think it's that, because I think like this group is kind of what they are. Like, we know the limitations of it, but they looked really bad in their roles, and it didn't help that it, and again, I don't say this to sound rude, but it didn't look, it wasn't good that it looked like the game had passed by Tobias Harris and Duncan Robinson last night. It's early in the season. You're still getting your feet under you. It's a completely different type of basketball going from the preseason to the regular season. I get all of that, but I'm watching Tobias Harris get blown by off the dribble by the likes of Trey Jones and Kevin Huerter, and then he's not able to post up against them on a switch on the other end. Maybe part of that's because the Pistons, and this was a problem for them last year, they just, for whatever reason, don't know how to throw an entry pass to the post. But him not being able to lock in position on guys that are smaller than him, that are weaker than him, Duncan Robinson having a poor shooting night is whatever. And on that note, I think about how we've essentially talked about, they swapped Malik Beasley for Duncan Robinson, and I've said like that's a loss of a swap, because like even if Malik Beasley had a night like he did, like Duncan Robinson did last night, where the three ball just wasn't dropping, I know Malik Beasley could have still gotten them 10 points on getting to the mid range, getting to his floater, maybe drawing a foul or two. Like, those are just things that Duncan Robinson doesn't have. He's a spot up 3-point shooter. He's a backdoor cutter kind of guy. I also don't think the Pistons necessarily did a good job of intentionally trying to set him up. They had him running a lot of rub screens for the ball handler. They never really ran something to get him off the ball, coming off of a screen, a pin down, an elevator, anything like that, to get him open away from the basketball, away from the play. So I thought that kind of played against his strengths. So I just saw a lot of different issues in the game, and it's only one game. It's really easy to microanalyze it as well, because it's the only game that we get to look at from this year so far in the regular season. But man, that doesn't even, without even talking about how poorly Cade Cunningham looked offensively, just in terms of getting the shot to fall really until the fourth quarter, and he was spectacular in the fourth. Made several huge plays, almost made a defensive play that would have given Detroit a chance to tie or win the game, with 10 seconds to play. So I was really concerned with how the offense looked, but I also don't necessarily know if it's going to get all that much better right now, unless Detroit does some things differently and, quite frankly, looks at getting someone like a Danis Jenkins or Marcus Sasser on the court, a guy that can handle the ball a little bit, maybe even play alongside Cade Cunningham, just to help create some additional gravity on the court. And I'm going to stop talking because I want to talk about their defense, but I've already spent so much time talking about the offense. But yeah, just the thing is, the Pistons, in the grand scheme of things, should have been able to play a terrible game and still beaten the Chicago Bulls. The Bulls were out there already a bad team, but playing without Kobe White, who's arguably their best player, and the Pistons couldn't get the job done. I was incredibly disappointed. And then you look at the schedule that lies ahead of them, and you're like, you start trying to pencil in that first win. You're like, they're going to start 0-6.
Yeah, I mean, look, that is a very real possibility. And again, here's the thing. I don't disagree with anything you're saying here. And so people might be a little confused to why I'm like not freaking out about this. I just look at what this team was last year for the first 10 games of the season and how abysmal their defense was. Like, we were saying this about Tobias Harris to start last year. We were saying this about all these guys to start the last season. And while I think everything you're saying is completely valid, and there are concerns that I share long-term within that, I also am willing to say, like, I think that this team is going to need a couple weeks to readjust to what their reality is now. Because, look, they lost Jaden Ivey again just a couple weeks before the season started. They are now dealing with, the issue of, hey, we are down the guy that we were depending on to handle the ball. We're also down the guy who is supposed to be his backup this year in Marcus Sasser. And we're dealing with two new major pieces that are coming into our offense or into our defense that are going to be required to be on the perimeter, which is not harder to play, but it is harder to create that instantaneous chemistry, like perimeter switching, point of attack defense. You saw it a couple times last night. There were just issues with communication, and that went for Cade Cunningham as well. First quarter, there was, fourth quarter, there was a backdoor cut that Cade gave up, and somebody's going deuce. I got it. I think it was Paul Reed. And so there was just issues with communication all night. And I see that as being more of a chemistry issue. So I'm not freaking out about the defense quite as much as I think a lot of other people are. Jalen Duren looked horrible at that end. When is he ever not against Nikola Vucevic? I know that is a bad thing, but it is a thing that has, that guy is in the inner circle of Pistons killers, along with the Lopez twins and Marvin Williams and Terry Rozier, R.I.P. You could always bet on Terry Rozier hitting his overs against Detroit. But seriously, I just think that on that end of the floor, they're going to need a little time to gel. And I think the Bulls actually do present a somewhat uniquely poor matchup for them. They have historically on the defensive end. Offensively, I think there are definitely some things that they have to figure out. For me, the number one thing that really stood out to me and that really has me concerned, Pistons went 7 of 24 from 3 last night. 24 3-point attempts. That just simply is not going to cut it in the NBA. You can't win games like that. And I feel kind of bad for Trajan Langdon because I think he is going to get... Because look, I think if I'm really looking at this, I still think this team is good enough to win 40-plus games in the East, but I think it is not going to be... We're not looking at 48, 49, 50. I just think that with Jaden Ivey out, that window is closed at this point. They're going to have too much to figure out too soon, too early in the season. I can't see them putting together that kind of streak. But I think when you look at it, losing Malik Beasley has just really, really killed them. They have no movement shooting on this roster.
None.
And that's really the thing. Duncan Robinson, yes, he can replace some of the shooting, but we saw it last night. He's being used more like Tim Hardaway Jr. was last year than Malik Beasley was. And I think for me, that's the number one thing I'm concerned about is there is no movement shooting on this roster. And you look at the offseason that they had, and it's you can kill him for not getting movement shooting, but where was he going to get movement shooting? Really losing Malik Beasley really, really screwed up what this season should have been to begin with. They really need they need that situation figured out, because I think as of right now, we're looking at this and again, I'm not freaking out about it. I'm not selling on anyone, but there is a reason Jalen Duren and Jaden Ivey did not get extended. I think just looking at this roster and the reality of it, there is a very good chance this is a transitionary kind of year where the Pistons just really have to figure out exactly what they need in order to put this roster together while still maintaining competitiveness in these games.
Yeah, I just don't love what I saw yesterday, and it wasn't a game where it was okay, there's some clearly easy fixes here, plug and play type fixes that they're going to come out next game and be fine with. I think there are some severe roster constraints to this team. The 3-point shooting being one of them. Another thing that I talked about in the offseason being a problem. I was at a point yesterday where I was just maybe they just need to throw Chaz Lanier into the fire, because they just I mean, look at the guys that came off of their bench. Ron Holland, 1 of 4 from 3. Not really a shooter yet. We think there's a chance that he becomes a shooter, but he's not yet. He's not until he's proven he is. And until you do it in the regular season, it's great that he did it in Summer League. It's great that he did it in the preseason. But until you do it over a serious stretch in the regular season, you're not a proven shooter. Karis LeVert, 1 of 3. He has been a league average-ish type three-point shooter throughout his career, streaky seasonally averages. 1 year he might be above it, 1 year might be below it. Javonte Green didn't attempt a three-point shot yesterday, not really a three-point shooter. Paul Reed did make his 1 three-point attempt, and Isaiah Stewart made both his three-point attempts. So your three-point shooting came from your 2 of your centers, and then you got 1 from Tobias Harris, 1 from Cade Cunningham, 1 from Ron Holland, and 1 from Karis LeVert. They just don't have the floor spacing on this roster. There's no gravity on this roster, and that's why you saw Chicago, and part of why I think Cade Cunningham struggled, because it felt like you were watching the Pistons, not from last year, but from the Monty Williams season, where all teams did was put 5 guys, their 5 defensive guys, all of at least 1 foot in the paint, because who's hitting an outside shot on the Pistons roster? Who's making you pay for stuffing the paint so that Cade Cunningham can't get to the mid-range, can't get to the rim? Nobody. And that's how it felt yesterday. And I don't think it's as simple as, they'll shoot better next game. They're going to, their roster has some serious constraints. And they spent a lot of time on the court yesterday with Ron Holland, Asar Thompson, and Jalen Duren out there together. So you're playing 3 non-shooters. Your point guard is Cade Cunningham, who is not a sharpshooter by any stretch of the imagination. And then yesterday, you had Duncan Robinson out there, for example, who was a complete non-factor and was incredibly close to having a Tony Snell game before he got one, late layup that was wide open for. There were some other issues for Detroit. Quite frankly, something that they were really good at last year, I felt like, and where they really thrived was playing in transition. And yesterday, they were a disaster in transition offense. I think it was partially that the Bulls did a good job in transition. I think their transition defense looked actually really, really good. Guys got back, guys got big, they got to the paint. They did all like the basics that you learn at the fundamental levels. And the Pistons just they looked like they didn't know where to go. They didn't know if they were all supposed to crash in and go all to the rim. They didn't know if they were all supposed to space out. And so it just led to them in a 3-on-1 or a 2-on-1, and they'd end up pulling the ball out because they ran into each other, or there was no spacing for them to get to the other side of the rim, whatever. And that's a problem. That's another problem for this team. So I don't want to spend 45 minutes talking about all these bad things from one game. There's going to be plenty of more basketball. This was game 1 of game 82, but some issues for Detroit that I just don't know. They could certainly get better, but I think there's a ceiling to how much they can get better based off the roster that they have. And I think, I know you want to talk, so I'll wrap here, but I think they might have to consider some personnel adjustments. They might have to find a way to get Marcus Sasser or Dennis Jenkins in. If Marcus Sasser can't go, Dennis Jenkins needs to be given a look. And they might have to throw Chaz Lanier into the fire and see if he can hit some outside shots for them, because they just don't have any sort of offensive balance right now. And if they can't scare teams from the outside, they're not going to win basketball games. You don't win basketball games making 7 3-pointers in 2025. It just doesn't work that way.
I agree with you on the Lanier thing. Like, you have to take more threes. And I said this before the season as well. I was like, my main concern is I'm just looking at this roster and I'm going, where is the volume? Like, where's the volume on threes? And that was before Jaden Ivey went down. And you were depending on Jaden Ivey to be probably your second or Cade's still your second most important 3-point threat, because the reality is if his pull-up is working, like, everything else looks different. But, like, I still think Jaden Ivey was very much, somebody they wanted to use as an occasional spot-up shooter. And I think just Chaz Lanier is going to have to step into some sort of role. I don't know if he's ready. He probably isn't. But, like, you're going to have to do it. Here's the flip side to what you're saying, Aaron. Yes, the offense looked really bad for the first quarter. The reality is they scored at least 30 points in all 3 of the other quarters of the game. Second, third, fourth quarter, they scored 30-plus points in each one of those. I agree. Like, all these issues, we are on the same wavelength on. I'm saying, like, I think that there is some glass half full here. They can definitely get out and run in transition. They got beat in transition last night, but like, they can also dominate in the paint. They scored 62 paint points last night. And I just think that, like, dude, if Jalen Duren and Cade Cunningham hit 3 of the easy shots that they missed in the first quarter, I think you're walking out of there with like a win, and you're going like, hey, that was ugly, but they like figured it out. And I think as the game went on, they did figure some things out in regards to Ron Holland getting to the rim, in regards to Asar Thompson playmaking a little bit. He had 5 assists in the second half. They do definitely lack ball handling, but that is something that I see him improving on as the season goes on. I don't know, Aaron. Like, yes, I totally agree. This was a disappointing loss. There are some issues here that are going to be issues for the entire season, but they still play in the Eastern Conference. 2 of their most important players had their, honestly, I think you could argue their 3 most important players had terrible games last night. In Cade Cunningham, Duncan Robinson, and Jalen Duren, just in regards to the gravity and spacing that they create for everybody around them. All 3 of those guys had bad games, and they still almost won. Like, I do think that there is something there, and in a weak Eastern Conference, I do think they will be able to grind out and hustle their way to enough wins to still be in the playoff picture. So I guess for me, like, the way I'm looking at it is, yes, I think if you were somebody that was like hammering the over on the Pistons to start the season, I think maybe you need to reevaluate where you're at. But I think if you're somebody that's saying like this season's going to be a disaster, they're going to, win 30 games, I don't think we're there either. Like, I still think this team has the talent. I still think Cade Cunningham is enough of a star. And I think that they have the flexibility to figure things out, just like they did last year with the Dennis Schroeder deal. Like, I think they can figure something out here. So that's my glass half full kind of viewpoint on it, Aaron. Not that I disagree with anything you said, because there are certainly aspects of last night's game that were unacceptable and cannot continue if this team does want to, have any sort of upward trajectory for this year.
Jasper making the people happy, bringing some optimism to the table. I am the pessimist in this situation, but in reality, is I agree with you. Like, this isn't, and the sky is not falling. It's one game, and again, it's going to be microanalyzed because it's the only game we have to look at. If this was game 33 in the season, it would not be talked about in this way. That's just the reality of it. That being said,
and if they played like that for 33 games, I would not be coming on here and saying, hey, glass half full. I'll be losing my mind. So don't worry, fellow pessimists.
Looking ahead at Detroit's schedule, though, following that game, it does make me a bit concerned. They go out and they're at Houston on Friday night. They get Boston for the home opener on Sunday. Then they play Cleveland, Orlando, Dallas, and Memphis before they play the Jazz, who actually destroyed the Clippers in their season opener yesterday. This schedule for Detroit is tough, and trying to figure out where they're going to get that first win is tough for me as well, because after the Chicago game, I just don't feel super confident that the fix is going to be immediate for Detroit. It feels like this is going to take some time for them to figure out. So I want to turn to you here, because I want to know when you think the Pistons are going to get their first win after losing to Chicago and looking at the next 5-6 games on the schedule against playoff caliber teams. I just don't know where Detroit gets that first win of the season.
Yeah, I mean, way to put me on the spot. I'll say it. I think they beat the Celtics. And that might be a really stupid thing to say, because the Celtics can and will shoot a ton of threes. So if that team gets hot against you, forget about it. You're going to get run out of the gym, especially if you're a team with the 3-point shooting deficiencies that the Pistons have as of right now. But no, I still think the Celtics are beatable. I think the fact that, they went up against the 76ers and allowed, Tyrese Maxey, sure. You can see Tyrese Maxey dropping a 40 bomb on anybody's head. But VJ Edgecombe playing his first game and looking like a 10-year vet, I think VJ Edgecombe is very good, and I think he's going to have a really good career. But I think that says a little bit more actually about the Boston Celtics than it does VJ Edgecombe at this point. And again, I could be totally wrong in that regard, but I think the Celtics defense definitely has some weak points, especially on the perimeter. And I think that they are a team that Cade Cunningham can definitely take advantage of, along with Asar Thompson. I think this is actually, like, it sounds crazy to say, I think it could be an offense get right game against the Celtics. I don't see them beating the Rockets, but even if they lose to the Celtics, I definitely think that they can beat the Dallas Mavericks. That is a team with they have Cooper Flag playing point guard right now. The guy's never played point guard in his life. So I think the Mavericks, yes, Wemby destroyed them, and that's because Wemby's Wemby, but I think that team has a lot bigger issues as of right now. You talk about the lack of ball handling on the Pistons roster. Look at Dallas's roster as of right now. So I think at worst case scenario, they're beating Dallas at home. Aaron, do you see anything different? Are you as high on the Boston thing as I am, or are you looking to that Dallas game too?
I think the Celtics game is winnable. You get the home opener vibes there, so you get a little bit of a boost you would expect from that. It gets you, a little bit more ready to go. But if they can have some of the success that Philadelphia did against Boston on the offensive side of the floor, I think that they have a legitimate chance, simply because I don't think the offensive firepower for Boston is all that spectacular. The key for Detroit in any situation right now is, how do they come out defensively? If they are engaged defensively, if the effort is there, if they are playing high intensity basketball on the defensive end of the floor, I think that in most games they can have a shot. But they are not going to win games where they let up 35 points in the first quarter and put themselves in a 15-point hole. Yeah, they can come back against a team like the Chicago Bulls. When you're playing good teams, it's just not going to happen. Those teams will step on your throat and put you away, and they'll put you away early. So I think they have the ability to beat a team like Boston, especially without Jason Tatum. I think you're right about Dallas. I'll be very interested to see the Orlando Magic game, because I think that these two teams are in a similar category. I think Orlando is a step ahead because they made the Desmond Bane trade, and because they don't have a Jaden Ivey not on the court for them right now. But this is a team that before this season started, it was like, okay, these two teams are similar to each other in terms of talent level. We can see them finishing around the same spot. Orlando's a 3, 4, 5 seed in the East. The Pistons are probably closer to 4, 5, 6 seed in the East. So that's a really good matchup for them to determine how close they are to their direct competitors in the conference. I'd love to see them come out and beat Orlando at home. But it will be a tough matchup for them. Desmond Bane has had some very big games against the Pistons, and obviously we know that guys like Franz Wagner and Paolo Banchero have had a lot of success against them. Orlando's big. They're physical. They will be a test for Detroit. So all of these games coming up for them are very difficult. And I think, you'd be overreacting now if you said, oh, well, the Jazz are a better team than Detroit because of one game last night. But hey, the Jazz beat Detroit last year when they were an abysmal team. So I don't know. That is the kind of the beauty of the NBA. anyone can win on any given night. The Pistons are, though, I think they will have to lean on their strengths. They will have to play to their strengths. And for them, it's going to start defensively because their offense is really going to take some time to figure itself out, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you brought up Orlando because I actually feel as though Detroit and Orlando are comparable, but not necessarily this year. I think Detroit, if you're looking at their roster right now and the situation, it's more comparable to what Orlando was last year. And don't forget, like, Orlando had a lot of expectations coming into the season last year after a, unforeseen playoff run where they played their first round opponent very hard in the Cleveland Cavaliers. And everybody expected them to take a leap, and then they took a step backwards. And they had very similar issues to what we're talking about in regards to the Pistons roster this year. Hey, where's that secondary creation when Paolo Banchero is not in the game? Hey, where is the outside shooting? That's what they were dealing with last season, and we saw them take a step back because of it. I think the Pistons are in a little bit of a better shape than the Magic were last year, believe it or not. I think they have a more complete roster than the Magic did, but I can definitely see them having the same thing. Like, again, a team that built their identity on hard-nosed defense. So yeah, for me, like, I think that I totally agree. I think that's going to be a great test. We're going to see how they're going to play them. And you're totally right, Aaron. Like, they're going to have to play really good defense against these teams. The other thing, though, like I said, is that takes time. And, for all the expectations coming into this year, don't forget, last year the Pistons started off 1-5. Like, their defense was horrible. Their three-point shooting was not good enough. And they were able to turn it around as the season progressed. So we will see. Yeah, it's one game. Everybody's played one game right now. Some teams, Denver hasn't even played a game yet. So, like, we will see what happens. I'm just not willing to make any, like, sweeping proclamations about this team until we get at least a couple weeks into the season, and I can see how JB Bickerstaff adjusts his lineups, how they start communicating, if the defense improves. Those are just the things that I'm looking for right now. So I don't know. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with it.
All right, Jasper, I want to spend a few minutes talking about the bombshell that came out on Thursday related to the FBI arresting several people related to a gambling and betting fraud investigation. Among the people arrested were Terry Rozier, an NBA player for the Miami Heat, and this one that really stunned me and is really unfortunate to see was that Chauncey Billups, obviously a basketball Hall of Famer and Detroit Pistons champion and legend, but also the coach of the Portland Trailblazers, arrested. What is important for the Pistons in this specific case, and this is a Pistons podcast, so I think it's important to really focus on that. I don't necessarily want to spend too much time talking about stuff that hasn't necessarily been proven in court yet, but Malik Beasley was not named or arrested as part of this federal investigation today. His agent came out and said that Malik Beasley did not cooperate with the FBI or the feds during this investigation, essentially, like, as a way of saying he was not snitching on anyone that was arrested today, because there were some pretty clear ties to the mafia families, which was also a big part of this story. But Malik Beasley not part of today's news, and that is, for all intents and purposes, a good thing, because in the grand scheme of things related to the Pistons, especially after watching that Chicago game, you'd like to find a way to get Malik Beasley back on the floor as soon as possible.
Yeah, I mean, hey, just from a Pistons perspective alone, clear, free Malik, please. I'm begging you for our mental health, because look, every criticism we've had, I think, like, other than the defense, basically goes away if they get Malik Beasley back during the season. Like, I think that completely changes the outlook of how you feel about this roster moving forward. especially if you get Jaden Ivey back in a reasonable time frame. But look, in regards to this gambling thing, man, it's really bad, and it just sucks. I think like on a personal level as well to see somebody like Chauncey Billups, like genuinely one of my favorite players of all time, in my opinion, one of the most underrated players of the 2000s. Like the fact that you can be a Hall of Famer, and I still think people don't really realize how good Chauncey Billups was. Like if you are an advanced stat nerd, Chauncey Billups' best year by win shares and BPM is better than any Kobe Bryant year. Just throwing that out there. Like the guy drove winning like nobody else. His teams won like 650 games in a in like an 11-year stretch. Like the guy was just a serial winner. And it just really sucks to see him caught up in something like this. It does make you really wonder though, like I saw clips going around from a poker podcast back in 2023 that was talking about how the Only Friends podcast, talking about how professional poker players had gone out to Las Vegas with the with the promise of playing with Chauncey Billups. And when they got there, they immediately realized it was a setup. And that, the only people losing were the pros, and people who barely knew how to play poker were winning every hand. So it sounds like this was a thing that was probably known in circles for a minute here. You just have to wonder, like, dude, why? Like, Sean, like, why? Like, you are a multi-millionaire. You're an NBA head coach. Like, what are you doing, my guy? Yeah, if you're a young Pistons fan, just don't look up anything that Chauncey Billups has ever been alleged of. All right, just don't Google that rap sheet, because you will not like what you see there. And this is unfortunately, like, I mean, getting in bed with the mafia, man. Like, come on.
How does one even do that? How does an NBA coach find his way into those?
As an Italian, I have no idea, and anybody who says I do is a liar. I just want to point that out.
It reminded me of Lawrence Taylor in The Sopranos playing with.
That's what happens. Hey, I guess I don't know, man. He must have been in for too many boxes of ziti. That happens.
All those memes on Twitter were hilarious. Twitter was a day today with all of the gambling stuff. Also the just the reactions. I also saw some stuff on like how it's weird that the NBA is being targeted for this. The NBA is being purposely targeted for this. I thought that was a little odd, especially since we've seen all of the stuff in the last year and a half with baseball. We've seen several players in baseball, fall under investigation with this. So I don't know.
No, you mean translators fall under investigation for it.
Translators and the Cleveland Guardians. How about that?
That is correct. But with Emmanuel Claus, I don't believe that there's an FBI. Like, he's not getting I don't believe Emmanuel Claus got arrested for it, right? He's just banned for life. But perhaps that's something that's coming down the pipe. Obviously, like I said, this Chauncey thing was known in gambling circles for years. So obviously this was a case that was being prepared for a while now.
This has been ongoing for years. This is not people who dislike the NBA in big time circles of the last year have decided to, plot against it. This is something that's been going on for a while now. And
the Jonte Porter thing came out, a year and a half ago now. And that is directly.
Frankly, it's vital that this gets solved, but it also gets put in the limelight, because NBA players, NBA coaches, NFL players, NFL coaches, MLB, any major pro sports league that are seeing millions and millions of dollars wagered on their games, there's no place for anyone in these positions of power to throw these games or decide these bets based on their own personal, performance and whatnot. So, I'm all for putting these guys out there and making sure that this gets shamed and these guys ultimately face consequences, because there's just way too much at stake here for this to go under the table, which, and this is a rabbit hole that I'm not prepared to get down right now, but I mean, I watched some stuff from Brian Windhorst today, and it certainly sounds like the NBA has been trying to cover up some of this stuff. He was talking about how Terry Rozier, the sports books noticed the high take on some action against him and alerted the NBA, and then all of a sudden the next game Terry Rozier didn't play, and he didn't play the rest of the season. He had a fake injury, according to Brian Windhorst. So there's a lot going on here, and a lot still needs to come out. A lot of the investigation, I'm sure, still needs to transpire. So there's only so much you can say. In a world, I wish Chauncey Billups was not involved in this, and somehow his name gets cleared, because he is such an icon, and as far as I knew, was a really good person. So this is just a mess for the league, and it's going to take some time for this to play out.
Yeah, I mean, you have to root it out. Like I there are certain things that I am willing to have like a discussion about, the use of PEDs in sports. Like I see arguments for and against it. But gambling is one of those things where it's like, once it enters your sport and players are gambling on their own games and affecting the outcomes of games and stat lines and such, for their own financial gain or the financial gain of somebody else, you are dead. You're dead. Because the entire point of it is that you are engaging in legitimate athletic competition. And, you can debate the of whether, PED usage is legitimate. But for me, it's, if you're taking PEDs, you're doing it to get better, to perform at a higher level. If you are gambling on games, that's not the same thing. You are affecting the outcome in a tangible manner that is, there is no argument for it. You know what I mean?
People who, you're deliberately deceiving people, and you're deliberately deceiving people who have, as a general population, are likely to have millions of dollars on that game on any given day. So there's just no place for it in the league. And if the league was in fact hiding this under the table, I don't know how it gets regulated, but the NBA should be in some serious trouble.
Yeah, it's going to get messier before it gets cleaned up. Let's be honest about it. Like that's the reality of the situation. And it's something that they have to deal with in, I think, the harshest manner possible, because you can't condone something like that. Like, it needs to be, if these guys are betting on their own games or throwing their own games for somebody else's benefit, you're gone. Like, you can't continue. You've lost that trust. And we've talked about how much talent is outside of the NBA right now in regards to Dennis Jenkins, you know what I mean? Like, a guy that we think should deserve an NBA shot. And there's just too much talent out there to be wasting it on guys like Terry Rozier. I'm sorry.
That being said, free Malik Beasley and get him in a Pistons jersey as soon as possible.
Clear it up, baby. Cash. I've never wanted your creepy bug eyes to look over documents so fast, buddy. Start.
What was I gonna say? Oh, number 5 may be taken, but they can find another jersey for him. Get him back on the court.
Give him 5. I don't care.
Let them both wear 5 at this point.
I don't care. We need a man who can come off a pin down screen like nobody's business. All right, I don't care, man.
Oh man, yeah. We'll have to see how this plays out, but it's going to take some time, and unfortunately, in reality, this probably does not help Malik Beasley necessarily get his name cleared so that he can return any sooner, because now the league is going to be under so much scrutiny and under such a watchful eye that even if he's not involved in this, he's probably just going to get bogged down in everything that's going on. But man, I hope that's not the case. All right, I don't want to talk about the gambling investigation anymore. It's honestly just quite sickening that this is where we're at. The Pistons play next Friday night against the Houston Rockets on the road in Houston. That will be a really interesting game. I think, you'd like to see Detroit compete in that one. I think it's fair to say, you're not expecting them to win, but man, you hope they compete, and then you hope that they come out on Sunday and they capitalize on being at home against the Boston Celtic team without Jason Tatum, and they get that first win of the season, get the monkey off the back, and start showing some signs of life on offense.
Yeah, without a doubt. There are things that they need to figure out. The way I look at it is that there are some things that are very, very fixable and in a very obvious, easy manner. And there are some things that they are going to struggle with all season until they upgrade the roster. One last thing we should just touch on. They did not extend Jalen Duren. They did not extend Jaden Ivey. Aaron, did you're cool. You know how I felt about this. We're both on this restricted free agency. I think we've both been very consistent, and nothing about the last week has changed my opinion. Looking at Jalen Duren last night and the Jaden Ivey injury, makes me feel like exactly like that. You got time to figure it out.
There was just no incentive to signing either of them right now. It especially made no sense for Ivy after the injury. It didn't make sense before that because you didn't get to really see him come back from the injury outside of the preseason. And then with Jalen Duren, I just think it's a prove it year for him. Can you do it over a full season? He did it for 2025, but he didn't do it for the 2024 part of last year. Can you show a full season of improvement? Continue to take steps in the right direction. And it just makes no sense for Detroit to have done deals with either of them, before the season kicked off and before the deadline. So you play out this season and you go from there. I think it makes complete sense. And I really haven't seen anyone say otherwise. So I'm glad we're on lockstep on this, and I'm glad that the consensus on this is smartly saying there was no reason to force a deal here that just wasn't necessary.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, totally agree. That is going to do it for this week's edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast. Before you go, make sure that you are liking the show, that you're following the show, that you're subscribed to the show from wherever you watched or listened to from today. Leave a comment in the YouTube section or on Spotify. Let us know what you thought about the show today, what we talked about. Are you panicking about the Detroit Pistons? Did the Chicago Bulls loss in the season opener scare you off? Or are you confident that it was just a slow start? We saw some improvement later in the game, and they'll fix it from here on out. Let us know what you think. Make sure you're also subscribed to palaceofpistons.com to get all of our content sent directly to your email inbox, completely free of charge. That is going to do it for this edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast, brought to you by Believe and our friends over at the FanDuel Sportsbook. I'm Aaron Johnson, signing off for myself and Jasper Apollonia. See you guys next time.